Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tonight, I have something extra special for you. Our good friend John R. Brandon Bayton is with us tonight. John Bayton is a passionate consultant and advocate for the renal health community. He was diagnosed with end-stage renal disease in 2004 and has since undergone not one but two kidney transplants, with his most recent February 27, 2019 at the MedStar Georgetown Transplant Institute. John was recently appointed to serve a 3-year term on the Organ Procurement and Transplant Network Minority Affairs Committee. The OPTN is a national organization responsible for the acquisition and distribution of organs. This year, John has become an affiliate member of the American Society of Nephrology, the ASN, the nation's largest organization of nephrologists and kidney health professionals. He is a member of the University of Manitoba's Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity SOGI Advisory Board and a consultant and subject matter expert for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. He's with the End-Stage Renal Disease Network 5 Patient Advisory Committee managed by the Quality Insights. John is also the newest member of Kidney Research Institute's Patient Advisory Committee, a collaboration between Northwest Kidney Centers and the University of Washington Department of Medicine. John is a very, very, very active patient ambassador and subject matter expert for the American Kidney Fund, the Infinite Legacy, and the Coalition of Supportive Kidney Health. He is a former member of the American Society of Transplant Community Advisory Council, and was the first patient advocate to serve on the AST's Public Policy Committee. John has been a long-time resident of Washington, D.C. for nearly 24 years. He has long been an advocate for LGBTQ rights and healthcare. In 2003, he served with the Service Members Legal Defense Fund, which led to the overturning of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. From 2009 to 2012, John led a national HIV/AIDS campaign at the bequest of the Office of HIV/AIDS and Infectious Disease Office of the Assistant Secretary of Health, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Today, John serves as an executive producer for the Capital Pride Alliance and is preparing for two events, Capital Pride in 2024 and World Pride in 2025, which will be hosted in Washington, D.C. Just this past Wednesday, October 18th, John was presented with the American Kidney Fund's Hero of Hope Award during its annual Hope Affair Gala. Earlier this year, John was recognized by the Capital Pride Alliance with the Bill Miles Award for Outstanding Service. John attended Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia, and majored in political science and technical theater. He is also a certified meeting planner and a certified government meeting planner. John specializes in public relations, marketing, strategic business development. He is the founder and CEO of Brandon in DC, a lifestyle, hospitality, and culinary public relations and event planning firm. He is also a passionate advocate for social change and keen on addressing the disparities that exist in our society, particularly in healthcare, I might add. John enjoys amateur photography, is a bit of a foodie, John, and loves to indulge in science fiction and technology. Please give a warm welcome to one of the best kidney advocates on the planet. Mr. John Bayton is here with us tonight. John, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing great, and that was an amazing introduction. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We got people on the line already. Bobby Reed says hello. She's looking forward to the show.
Hi, Bobby. I'll hope to
So,
see you soon.
all right. Did I state everything correctly in the introduction, John?
Yes, you did. I didn't realize I had done so much, but thank you.
Please tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your education, and your employment experience.
All right. Well, I was born in a small little town in Virginia called Tappahannock, Virginia. Well, actually, I was born in Richmond, but I was raised in Tappahannock, Virginia, and more commonly known as Tappahannock on the Rappahannock River. I basically I'm a country boy who got transplanted to the big city. Um, Growing up in Tappahannock was really cool. It was pretty much, I lived your traditional Gen X life. In other words, basically, I drank from the water hose. I was outside all day and played. I didn't have a smartphone, and I actually learned how to make friends without the computer. So. Um, And moving on, I mean, I did most of my high school years in Tappahannock, although I did do a brief stint in some private institutions, private school. And that was mainly because of traveling around. I also then moved to went to Washington University, majoring in political science and technical theater. Little did I know how great those two degrees would be living here in Washington, D.C. So I understand the political scene and the theatrics that go on behind it. I've always had a love for event planning and marketing. And so my first job here in DC actually really introduced me to that realm. And I found myself working for the telecommunications industry, especially in the realm of public policy, which led to me working with a lot of the telecommunication companies. Moving forward, I then became a member of Service Members Legal Defense Network, whose primary responsibility was to overturn Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was successfully accomplished. And I worked for the organization as their lead event manager. I've also worked for an international policy organization called the Center for Global Development. I was actually part of the initial team. I came aboard about 4 months after the organization had been founded. And now it is a leading organization in policy here in DC, a leading think tank located on Massachusetts Avenue. They do amazing work. And again, I served in the area of marketing and PR. Then I moved on into federal contracting and spent about a total of 8, maybe 9 years in federal contracting, working mainly for health organizations. So I've actually managed projects and worked on projects for NIH, the CDC, CMS, as well as Department of Justice. One consulting agency specialized, it was a Native American owned organization. And so I actually did about 4 years with them, focusing on Native American education, Department of Justice issues, tribal consultations, which was amazing because I really got to experience the culture by traveling to a lot of the different reservations and meeting with tribal leaders and influential members within the community. Then I moved on from there. Well, actually, I didn't move on. My kidneys failed, which caused me to move on. And after I dealt with that, and the organization I was working with at the time was amazing. They, I would start the day at 8 and they would let me leave at 3, just in time to get to the dialysis center to do my treatments, which was an amazing, being able to just keep working was amazing, but it was a little bit of a hiccup. So I kind of stayed put for a while. Then after my first transplant, well, actually my second transplant rather, I entered the realm of hospitality and entertainment. I actually worked for, and I highly suggest anyone who comes to DC stop by and visit it. It's called Wonder Garden. It is an outdoor German-themed beer garden, one of the largest in the District of Columbia and one of the most authentic. And from there, I started literally just as to manage a couple of events. I wasn't even supposed to be there full time, and went on to 3 to 4 years of managing the entire establishment, staff, payroll, you name it, while also doing all the PR, all the marketing, all the community outreach. And that led me to where I'm at now, where that is my specialty. It is what I do, PR and marketing and event planning. And I focus particularly here in the entertainment, hospitality, and food industry, which is amazing because I get to attend some awesome events, eat some terrific food, and really get to live and enjoy and see DC at its finest, which to me, Washington, DC is the best city in the world. I know a couple of your listeners are probably going to debate that, but yay, DC. So
you got a couple of fans on the line here that want to say hello, John. Donna Tussada's on the line, and our friend Don Kurtowski is on with us. So
hi there, everyone.
Let's talk a little bit about your kidney experiences. When were you first diagnosed with end-stage renal disease?
I was diagnosed with end-stage renal disease in 2003, 2004, if memory serves correct. And it was actually during the time that I was working for the Center for Global Development. And I went into work one day, and this is actually an interesting story because I, like many others, crashed into dialysis. But my experience was I had been going into work for a couple of weeks, almost about a month, and I was feeling off. Like, I wasn't eating as much, a little nauseous, headache, but it was also very hot summer, and I used to walk to work. So I just assumed it was the heat, or I was working long hours and not giving myself enough time to sleep and so forth. So basically doing the typical male thing of self-diagnosing. And then one day I went into the office to prepare to start. We were hosting a large event. And the event was hosting Bono from U2, President Clinton, and First Lady Hillary Clinton. And I was super psyched. I was like, I was going to meet them. I was, it was like I had been looking forward to this meeting and producing this particular event for a long time. And I arrived at the office that day and literally walked through the door, ran to the bathroom, threw up, had to sit down, and my colleagues called the ambulance. The ambulance came to pick me up, and they took me to the hospital. And I was diagnosed with end-stage renal disease in the emergency room several hours later. I did end up meeting President Clinton and Hillary Clinton some years later. I never got to meet Bono, but he did send me a letter wishing me well. So, but it hit me out of the blue, and I found myself in the hospital being diagnosed. I cried when they diagnosed me, and more so not because I had been diagnosed with kidney disease, but I had been diagnosed and didn't know what it was. I was being presented with this information. I had no clue of what it meant, where I was going to go, what it was going to lead me to. And, shortly thereafter, and this was the time that I was diagnosed was about, like I said, 2003, 2004. So the method, they came pretty much almost automatically in the room. And instead of a chest catheter, a permacath, they actually put a permacath in my leg. And that still to this day traumatizes me, because they numbed the area and they got it all set up and they got it all fixed in. But the process, I just remember the process. I was not knocked out. I was completely aware of what was going on. And I spent maybe about a week in the hospital, and then they sent me to a dialysis center. And the first dialysis center I actually went to was by the recommendation of the nephrologist that I had been assigned to at the hospital, and came into a little bit of conflict because I lived in down like Logan Circle, DC. If you know DC, we're like neighborhood oriented. So you have Logan Circle, DuPont Circle, and I was living actually in DuPont Circle at the time. My work was like literally 6 blocks from my home. But she wanted me to travel outside of DC to her dialysis center, to which I then said, no, there's a dialysis center right around the corner from me that I can walk to and get to much easier. So long story short, we changed providers very quickly. I was assigned a new nephrologist at the center, and probably the best decision, one of the best decisions of my journey. Subsequently, they got me into the center. It was maybe about 3 months later where the doctor suggested to me to do peritoneal. And before I knew it, I was on my peritoneal dialysis, my peritoneal journey. Went through training, finished sooner than they typically, allotted, and I was doing dialysis at home. Unfortunately, over the course of about 2 years, at the time, they didn't tape the tube in your peritoneum cavity down. And so mine would move and then get blocked up against the layer in my cavity, would start sucking. And so after several readjustments, I went back into the center for dialysis again, in-center dialysis. 7 years later, I got my call for my first transplant.
Okay. Let me ask a couple of questions here, John.
Mm-hmm.
What was your original diagnosis when your kidneys failed? For example, I was diagnosed as being polycystic. I had polycystic kidney disease. What was your diagnosis?
So believe it or not, I do not know. A biopsy was not done. A determination was not made at the time that I was diagnosed with kidney disease. And to this day, when I wasn't in the hospital, I presented with high blood pressure. But we don't know if the kidney disease caused the high blood pressure or the high blood pressure caused the kidney disease. We know that they're related, of course. But as for a lot of people who actually know what their disease stemmed from, I do not.
Okay. Let's talk about the amount of time that you were on dialysis before your first kidney transplant. I understand, and by the way, folks, I understand, John, you've been on about every mode of kidney dialysis that exists. Is that correct?
That's correct. I've done them all, except Kyle Chang actually pointed out to me there was one that I have not done, and I'm trying to remember which one it was. And that way, if it comes to me, I will share with you. But he did tell me one time that I had not done them all. But I have done hemo, peritoneal, home hemodialysis, as they would in the clinic, home peritoneal dialysis, in-center dialysis, and nocturnal dialysis, where I actually went into the center. I stayed overnight. And that was amazing because it was longer dialysis. So I actually felt more normal than having it all done in 3 hours or 4 hours and then feeling exhausted afterwards.
What was the amount of time that you waited between the time that you first started dialysis and your very first kidney transplant?
8 years.
Wow.
I waited 8 years, and it was so my current nephrologist is not the nephrologist I started off with when I went to the DuPont Circle Dialysis Center. He actually replaced the doctor who was attending to me because that doctor retired. And I had already been on the transplant list, had already gotten that process done. And my new nephrologist walked in, looked at my chart and said, "Why are you still here?" And I don't know. I would like to say that through his good graces, he made some calls. He talked to the center. He's, you know, he says his numbers are here. Why hasn't he been getting called? Why hasn't he been called? And then I think about a year and a half after he became my doctor, I got my first call for a transplant, and I was transplanted.
Okay. What location, what transplant center were you transplanted at?
So I was transplanted at MedStar Washington Hospital Center. Now, both my transplants I've received via MedStar. So at the first time is at Washington Hospital Center, but MedStar centralized all of their transplant procedures and to their Georgetown location. So my first was at Washington Hospital Center. My second was at Georgetown.
Okay. Were there any issues or complications with that first transplant?
None. I've been very, very fortunate in not to have had any major issues with any of the transplants outside of my first one, you know, reaching that point where it just wasn't going to be viable anymore. My recovery times have always been sooner than expected. And I really haven't suffered any major issues outside of that. And in both cases, blood pressure was corrected. I mean, I've been very, very lucky, and I've been very, very fortunate. And I credit that really to my medical team, because my nephrologist, the most amazing man, that he's just amazing. He actually, the best thing about my nephrologist, he communicates with me. He actually talks to me. You know, there was a time that before we went to my chart, he would send me emails, and we would have these enlightening conversations about new treatments and, you know, stuff that was happening in the community. He was he's very interactive with my primary care physician. So like my primary care physician doesn't prescribe anything until he is actually consulted with my nephrologist. The same is true with my cardiologist. They work as a team. And I've actually told some of my fellow kidney patients that who I hear their stories, and when I tell my story, it seems it's kind of vastly different. And so I sometimes bill myself as this is what happens when the system works, when your doctor cares and they have input, when your primary care, your cardiologist, your urologist, or whoever they are, actually talk with one another. And they're, you know, good with technology, which I love. And all I have to do, like literally, I could send a message right now via my chart. And if my doctor is up, and 9 times out of 10 he is, he will respond. He's so great that I remember when I was doing nocturnal dialysis, he would come see me while I was there at night. Like we're talking 9 p.m., 10 p.m. He would come by every month to check on me and visit me, to the point that one of his partners actually saw me in the hall one night and asked me if I could go to him because they felt he was overextending himself. And I mentioned that to my doctor, and he said, no, I'm coming to you. Done deal. We're not talking about this anymore. Yeah, I've been very, very blessed in both my transplant procedures and my journey. I will say the only thing that is, do need to lose a little weight, but everything else, all my numbers are good. So
good. How long between the time that you were transplanted with your first transplant passed before the first transplant failed?
So it was about 7 years, actually, about 7 or 8 years. So I received my transplant in 2009. And then I received my second transplant in 2019.
Okay.
between my first transplant, which like I said, yeah, about 7, 8 years. If I'm doing the math correctly, I don't think I'm doing the math absolutely correctly, but I'm not a math whiz, so I'm going to put that out there. I'm computer and calculator dependent. But yeah, so the time in between my first transplant was long. I waited quite a long time. The time between for my second transplant, I only waited about 3 years, like 3.5 years. And I look back and I still can't believe it was 3.5 years. It didn't seem like 3.5 years in comparison to the first time, because during that time I was actually doing home hemodialysis, and I had much more control, and so I really was able to integrate it into my life and not let it become my life. And it also just let me feeling a lot better. And so I maintained a job, reinvented myself as a consultant instead of going in for the 9 to 5. Another great decision I made. And so, yeah, like I said, I've been very, very blessed in my journey. I have not experienced any major problems outside of one. Actually, one comes to mind, which is interesting, because after my second transplant, I was removing fluid. This was when I was doing home dialysis. I was removing fluid, but I was removing it at what I thought was my dry weight. But it turns out I had lost weight. And so I still was accumulating fluid, even though I thought that I was taking enough off. And we couldn't figure it out. Like, I had to go to the emergency room one time, and they were in the register, and they did what they do. And then it was like I was leaving the emergency room, and then I went back to dialysis, went back home, and I saw my doctor the next day, and he was like, "You've lost weight." And I was like, "What are you talking about? How I've lost weight?" And he diagnosed me, says, "I know you, you know," he just knew. And so we went back to the hospital. He had me readmitted, and we went through an intense dialysis process. And I have to make it clear, this was prior to my second transplant. Actually, this is when I was doing on dialysis. And after taking off about 6 kilos, I was fine.
Okay. When you were doing home hemodialysis between your first transplant and your second transplant, were you putting in your own needles, or did you have a caretaker that was helping you? How did that work?
I was putting in my own needles. So when I was trained with a partner about the last 2 weeks of my training. My partner came in. But during that time, that is when CMS released new guidelines saying that you could do your dialysis by yourself. You didn't need a care partner. I had one. He is an amazing guy, one of my best friends today. We had an apartment together, and he volunteered. He says, "I'll do it." Had to think about it. It was like, I know you, and I'm not sure I want you sticking needles in my arm. But yeah, it worked out so that he was there for emergency, but I never had an emergency. So, because the one thing you do with home hemodialysis, and you only do it once, you don't do it anymore ever after this, is that when you're disconnecting from the machine, you forget to clamp. You only do that once, because after you see blood going everywhere, you always remember to clamp as you're disengaging. But like I say, if should my kidney now ever fail, God forbid, I would definitely go back to doing home dialysis. And that's why I'm always looking for new, I'm always keeping abreast of new developments, new research, new technology, because we all know that our kidneys, we would like to say they're going to last forever. And, a couple of my good friend situation. I'm sure you know George Franklin. He's been very fortunate, and has lasted, I almost want to say 42 years. But we also know that, I can wake up tomorrow morning and, find that my kidney is not working. So, so I'm always trying to be prepared for the next level.
Yeah. George has been on the show, John, and talked to us. Great guy, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the second transplant. My notes tell me that you were transplanted February 27th, 2019 at MedStar Georgetown Transplant Institute. Have you had any complications or issues that you've not mentioned to us post-transplant to the current day?
No. I hadn't had any complications. In fact, my numbers have increasingly improved each time I've gone back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the only number that's a little off whack right now, and this is just for full transparency, is I am in that pre-diabetic stage, so I'm reversing it. And I know why I'm in that pre-diabetic stage is because I injured my right foot, was stationary, gained weight. Then the pandemic was going on at the same time. So I actually have to lose weight, which is what I'm in the process of doing now, is becoming more active, moving, trying not to indulge the restaurant scene in DC as much as I was before, which is easy to do because there's some great food here.
Our good friend Melissa Bias is on with us tonight. She was the last live broadcast that I did, and she's saying hello to everybody. So hello, Melissa. Let's talk about your kidney advocacy for a minute. I understand that you were recently appointed to a 3-year term on the Organ Procurement and Transplant Network Minority Affairs Committee. The
Yes.
OPTN being the only national organization responsible for the acquisition and distribution of organs. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with the OPTN?
Well, yeah. So I've only been active on the committee since July. We have met a couple times. Our first few meetings were more orientation based. And I have been really taking notes and learning my way around the organ procurement process and procedures, and I've learned quite a lot. I am the Region 2 representative, and which is a fairly large swath of an area. Right now, we are really focusing on a couple of issues, especially with EFGR and African Americans, and how it has been kind of used inappropriately and has kept some African Americans from getting, kidneys. So that is one of the big things, although it's in the process of being removed as a qualifier, and the process and policies surrounding that are kind of in play right now. We are looking at how to improve efficiency of the organ procurement and distribution process. That was one of the most interesting conversations that we had earlier this week. And earlier today, we actually just got an overall update on initiatives and some of the results that are, that are coming, that we're seeing, how the transition in light of the recent legislation that was signed by President Biden is impacting, and the expectations that legislation mandates. Also, we talked a little bit about today, which I was very interested in, the utilization of AI in the procurement process and the distribution process, as it pertains to minimizing not minimizing the human element, but minimizing and managing the administrative protocols that can easily keep an organ from being distributed in the amount of time that it needs to be. And the nice thing about being on the committee as well is I'm beginning to learn, and I did this with AST, but I'm also beginning to learn the ins and outs of other organ transplants as well, not just kidneys, and how much of a shared relationship we all have when it comes to our transplants, getting evaluated, the wait times, and finding out just how similar we are in our experiences.
Okay. I understand that this year you became an affiliate member of the American Society of Nephrology, ASN. Can you talk to us about your experiences with ASN?
So I'm begin my experiences with ASN. I actually attended last year's Kidney Week for the first time last year and had an amazing experience, met a lot of different people, and really, I think it was an introduction for me into another level of kidney advocacy, working with the professionals and hearing, some of the challenges that they experience, but also sharing them the challenges that we have, so they can start seeing things more from a patient perspective when they're making their decisions. I actually became an affiliate member as a result of being accepted into the CLE Society, which is a small group of us, a small group of patients that they select every year. They award grants to attend Kidney Week. So I will be at Kidney Week this coming November the 1st. And I'm really looking forward to a number of the activities that they have scheduled for us while we're there. I tend to love organized participation in events. And so they have lined up some really amazing activities for us that actually are designed to engage us and engage the professionals with us as well. Actually having us sit down in the room with them and share our experiences. So I'm really looking forward to those opportunities.
Okay. Our friend Jonathan Traylor is checked in, and he posted my favorite word when it comes to broadcast: shared. So your broadcast is being shared. Steve Belcher wants to say hello to both of us.
Hello.
You got quite an audience going for you here, my friend. Let's talk about your connection with the End-Stage Renal Disease Network 5 Patients Advisory Committee. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the ESRD Network 5 holds a special place in my heart because they were really my first foray into advocacy. Because let me I don't want to confuse people. So AKF was my first foray into actual advocacy work, public policy work, meeting with legislators, and really them tapping me and engaging me to use my voice. ESRD Network 5 was my first foray into understanding more of the policies and regulations that govern transplant centers, dialysis centers, and how it intersects and how they work for the U.S. government, the federal government, to ensure that CMS rules and so forth are being maintained and by all of the different components of the dialysis center and the transplant center. So, and I still remember my first call. I got on the call. That's where I actually met. That was my first connection with Patrick G, who I'm sure most people are familiar with. One of my mentors here, Dave White, George Franklin. This is how it was my initial meeting of a lot of people who I consider mentors in this area. We meet once a month. We actually twice. So there's one meeting that takes place where we actually discuss and talk about ongoing issues in the dialysis centers that patients have shared and that they're looking into. But we also talk about the different initiatives, potential involvement in additional projects that address kidney disease. And it's just amazing a group. It's like a family. We get on there. We're unafraid to share. I know I've done my fair share, but it's an amazing group. And ESRD Network 5 represents West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. Bless you.
Thank you. Okay, let's talk about the work that you're doing with the Kidney Research Institute Patient Advisory Committee.
So I was actually offered Glenda Roberts, who I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with as well. She's one of our rock stars out at the University of Washington, and the Kidney Research Institute's work. My involvement as part of the committee is to just we do these amazing like quarterly meetings where we actually hear from leading members in kidney disease research, xenotransplantation, new dialysis machine marketing, new research. And we conduct almost a day-long meeting where we actually get to hear from these professionals, engage with them, share our thoughts, our feelings, our ideas, and help kind of facilitate and motivate their research further. And I am, extremely grateful to Glenda, and I'm also extremely grateful to Nicole Jefferson, who also recommended me. So it is one of the newer events. We've only had one meeting so far. I'm waiting for the second one to be scheduled, but I recognized immediately some of the people who were participating, and I was very honored to be among them.
Okay. Talk to us about some of your experiences with the American Kidney Fund. You've mentioned them a couple of times. What's going on with the AKF?
So with AKF, I became involved with them almost about 6 months after my second transplant. And it's a unique story that I like to tell, and kind of something that I think all organizations should know. So after my getting involved with the ESRD Network 5, I wanted to do more. And when I was looking to do more, I found several organizations, and I proceeded to go to their websites. And all the websites have this page where you become involved, sign up, become involved. And I literally signed up, and AKF responded. They reached out, and before I knew it, I was doing it was actually kind of funny because I was doing an event almost about a month or so after I had reached out. I was doing a public health event where we went to the Washington Convention Center here in DC, and we were actually engaging with patients and asking them, have you had your, when was the last time you had your blood pressure checked? And then we would check their blood pressure. We made arrangements for them to get, testing for diabetes. We engaged them with information. And honestly, that is my favorite thing about doing all the meetings, all the going to the Hill, all that is wonderful. But the thing I like is actually really engaging with patients. And that was what AKF allowed me to do through these meetings with the patients and talking with patients and sort of, working with them. Of course, a lot of that was put on hold when the pandemic, came about, where meeting people and interacting with people became almost non-existent. But now we are back doing that. AKF has always engaged me as well. They'll call me up for special meetings on the Hill and say, are you able to join us? I participated in their Hill days frequently. And they just gave me an amazing award that looks beautiful. And I also like that they always are sort of on the forefront of new legislation, of presenting new legislation and getting on board with supporting it and pushing it. You
mentioned being in Washington D.C. and their meetings on the Hill. You and I spoke last year about social media at one of their live meetings, so that was
Yes.
kind of cool.
Exactly. And I will say, being in DC has its benefits. And I'm literally living. I can basically, it will take me about 45 minutes to walk from my place to the Capitol. And so, of course, with Metro and Metro Bus, it's a lot less. But I'm very fortunate to be centrally located also. I can get to pretty much anywhere on the East Coast that I need to at the drop of a hat. Get to the Midwest fairly easily just by hopping on a plane, direct flight. So it affords me a lot of opportunities for advocacy and to be able to participate.
Talk to us a little bit about your experiences with the Infinite Legacy and Coalition for Supportive Kidney Health.
So Infinite Legacy and I became acquainted in 2022. There's a publication here called the Washington Blade, and every year they do an event called the Best of LGBTQ Washington, D.C. And Infinite Legacy is the organ procurement network here in D.C. And they manage Virginia, Maryland. They manage a portion of Virginia, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. And I actually went to the event that the Washington Blade held. And I was talking to this group of people. I didn't know who they were. I just casually sat down to eat. I just sat down next to one of their staff so that I could sort of eat what I was eating easily. And we started talking. And I think within 20 minutes of the conversation, after us all getting to know each other, what happens with me often is that I will say, yes, I am a kidney health advocate and I've had a transplant. And little did I know that the organization that's responsible for me getting my transplant in this area was sitting right next to me. And that started a whole communication, a lot of collaboration. I was able to do an event for them this past summer that honors the family and friends of those who have given, who have donated organ. I was actually scheduled to present at one of their conferences, but because of a work conflict, unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. They're amazing, and they're very, very active in DC. They fulfill one of the things I would love to see more often. I can turn on the TV during prime time, during the day, at night, and you'll see an ad running for Infinite Legacy. With that kind of, it starts off, I got the call. And they're basically educating people about people waiting for kidneys, the need to counter, and the fact that they're going to such extreme, costly measures to advertise this, and not just once a week at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m., but during prime time and talking about this just warms my heart.
Okay. Let's talk about your experiences with the American Society of Transplantation and the Transplant Advisory Council. I understand you were the first patient to advocate to serve on the AST's Public Policy Committee?
Yes, that's correct. I started with the advisory committee. I was introduced to AST by David White, actually, and became a member of the committee. And then I think maybe it was about a year and a half, 2 years after that, AST began to really embrace having patients be part of their other committees that patients weren't necessarily patients that weren't necessarily at the table. And I was very honored to be picked to be the member of the Public Policy Committee, which does a lot of integral work on the Hill, negotiating with stakeholders, counting to figure out, what votes are needed here, who's on board, who's not on board, and not just within the federal government, but also within the state, state legislatures as well. They focus again on all organs. So, all the policies that you would normally see on the kidney side, they're doing also for kidneys, but also working for heart, lung, skin, eyes, the whole 9 yards. It was also the organization that I got my first look at other organs too, and really started to hear some additional intimate conversations about legislation that they need and, their experiences. Prior to that, I was 100% all knowledgeable by kidney. Well, I wouldn't say all knowledgeable, but I was a kidney person. It was like all I knew was the kidney realm, and being introduced to them and some amazing advocates that I've had the opportunity to work with since then has been great.
Let's talk a little bit about some of your community activities. I understand that you are a member of the University of Manitoba's Sexual Orientation and Gender Advisory Board. Can you please tell us about your experiences with that?
So it is a fairly new organization. Like I said, it's based out of the University of Manitoba, and it basically and I was actually made aware of it through a fellow colleague of ours, whose name for some reason is eluding me at the moment. He's a nephrologist, pediatric nephrologist. Oh, Kenneth Sufa. So,
Ken, sure.
Yes. And so he made me aware of the group. And the group basically, I find it to be unique because it's addressing the voice of LGBTQ, IA plus individuals in the transplant arena. Challenges with medication, challenges, with the trans community, how utilization of medication and so forth could be not go the right way because they are taking different medications. And I'm actually doing sort of an oversimplified version of this description, but understanding how people's sexual orientation and how they identify plays into their interactions with their healthcare professionals. And like I said, I've been advocating and an advocate for a while, but this was the first group that I actually came across that was actually working within the LGBTQ community. And I just take away that from my first meeting, there is very little research and information that has been addressed to the community. So this is sort of a great step towards that.
Excellent, excellent. Please talk to us a little bit about your experiences with Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the Service Members Legal Defense Fund.
So when I first, in the early days of Washington, D.C., I became affiliated with an organization called Service Members Legal Defense Network. And that particular organization was 100% focused on the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy and the impact of people's lives. And quite frankly, how to a certain degree it was jeopardizing our own security. Because we had all these people who wanted to serve, who were capable of serving, a lot of which were already serving in fairly high level, but being dismissed or dishonorably discharged because of their sexual orientation. I came on board with the organization as their meeting and events planner, and subsequently became really involved in the issue. Met a lot of amazing people who were some of the smartest and brightest people I had ever met, who had skill sets that would blow most people away, and skill sets that were needed by our military, our armed forces, but they were being gotten rid of. In some cases, they were actively looking for people to target and removed from the ranks. And you mentioned that I'm really into social change and social justice, and so I hate seeing people treated poorly and being relegated to, outside of the general population for their beliefs and who they are. And so the issue became really, really important to me. And sure enough, several years later, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was overturned. And now people are able to freely serve their country, which we need. And so the experience was very enlightening and uplifting for me. And it also allowed me, that was like sort of my first opportunity that I really felt like I was serving. Like I was fighting for a cause bigger than myself.
Okay. Our friend Bobby Reed is telling me she's going to be at the ASN Kidney Week
Yes,
event
I saw that. Yes.
coming up, and she wants to make sure the two of you get hooked up. So I'll be looking around for Bobby.
Well, we're going to be in a lot of the same meetings together because I saw her name on the list. So.
All right. Talk to us a little bit about your experiences with the National HIV/AIDS campaign at the behest of the Office of HIV and AIDS Infectious Disease Office and the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services. I mean, that sounds like a big deal.
It was a national campaign, and it was a national campaign that was formulated out of the Office of HIV/AIDS and Policy. That's what it was called originally, OHAP. And then it was subsequently changed to the Office of HIV/AIDS Policy and Infectious Diseases. And it operated out of the Office of the Secretary of Health and Human Services. The plan was presented and crafted by a gentleman by the name of Christopher Bates. And what he wanted, and he crafted in the proposal that the government submitted, was to address the HIV/AIDS crisis from a perspective that basically was like, we don't care what you are. We don't care how you identify. We just want you to get tested, because if you get tested, you can take control of your health, and you can be with us. You don't have to die as a result of this disease. And so the approach, and it was right up my alley because, again, marketing and PR was what I really loved to do. And the campaign itself went in a different direction. You would think that a campaign called the National HIV Testing and AIDS Program would be going to conferences and health conferences and HIV/AIDS conferences and, working with organizations and so forth who were specifically dealing and talking, in those arenas. No. We went to trucker conferences. We went to engineering conferences. We went to where the people needed to hear it. We didn't want to talk to those who, well, let me rephrase. We did talk to people who were dealing with HIV/AIDS and who wanted to help and were out there already fighting the battle. What we wanted to make sure is that we were going into communities that needed to hear it. So we were going into churches. We were going into conferences and so forth that you just wouldn't necessarily expect to see health professionals. And we were amazingly received. And I'll give you an example of why it was so effective. Truck drivers in particular, they cross interstate borders all the time, every single day. Truck drivers, like many human beings, are sexually active. And so getting and changing behaviors and encouraging people to get tested was a perfect message to deliver. We weren't saying that you were gay. We weren't saying that you were Black. We weren't saying that you were a woman. We weren't saying that. We were just saying, you're human. You need to get tested because it's out there and it's devastating people's lives. And that approach was the first time I ever actually heard we coined the slogan, get tested, take control of your health. And now I hear that phrase, take control of your health, all over and a lot of different projects. And so it's one of what I feel one of my major achievements when in working with health. And, you know, we also got to coordinate with a lot of different agencies. We got to coordinate. We brought NIH, CMS, and Department of Health and Human Services, which you would think are all together, but we brought them together on this one topic, and we're able to we developed exhibits that were targeted for the community we were going into. So if we were going into a community or a conference that was, you know, mainly attended by women, we fine-tuned tools to make sure that we addressed the audience that we were going into. So it was, it was nationwide. So we went all over Alaska, almost all the 50 states. So like I said, it's one of those projects that I'm really proud of. And the end results were really positive.
Well, you got a little hero worship going on here, John. Did you see the remarks from Dawn? She says you're her inspiration and her hero.
Thank you very much, Dawn.
Let's talk a little bit about your working as an executive producer for the Capital Pride 2024 and World Pride 2025 events.
So Capital Pride Alliance is the organization that actually produces annual Pride celebrations here in June and throughout the year, actually. As an executive producer, I utilize my event planning skills and my marketing skills to support the organization through producing events and, you know, participating on the social media platforms, the marketing platforms. Just completed an event called Taste of Pride, which was right up my alley, which is sort of our restaurant style week event. So again, I was in restaurants eating a lot, which is why it's difficult to lose weight. And I'm trying to tell my doctor that, but he's not having it. But just working on events like, you know, like that throughout the year. Pride takes place for Washington, D.C. every June. But in 2025, we are the host city for World Pride, which we are expecting anywhere from 2 million to 4 million people additionally to come to DC during that time. World Pride is hosted about every 2 years in a different city. This previous year was hosted in Sydney, Australia. Several of my colleagues got to go. They left me here. I'm not angry about it or anything, but World Pride 2025 is probably going to be the largest production and event project that I have ever worked on. It goes beyond being a city event, like a citywide event that you see with a lot of the large conferences that come in, to literally being a city event where sporting venues, nightlife, art and culture, food industry, all that will be activated in that 1 year. And we've already begun the planning for it. So it's a very exciting time. Right now, like I said, my primary focus is events, marketing, and I also have the privilege of working with influencers, social media influencers. So a lot of meetings coming up to talk with them about working with some of the people that I follow online. Is just a thrill also to get to meet them.
Okay. Our friend Lisa Baxter is with us tonight, John, and she wants to say hello, and she says she's sharing. So way to go, Lisa.
Yeah, I hope to make it to New York sometime soon to see you. So.
Oh God, my two favorite questions are coming up. I saw a post on your Facebook page recently where you attended a dinner at the White House with the Human Rights Campaign, where you were acting both as an advocate for LGBTQ plus community and the kidney health community. And you were actually present when President Biden was giving a speech that was carried live on CNN. What was that like, bud?
So one minor correction. It was actually at the Washington Convention Center. Wasn't at the White House, but it was extremely exciting. I know the post that you're referring to, because I was, even with all that I've experienced, I still get very excited when new experiences happen to me. I'm like a little kid sometimes. And, to me, I still get amazed that I'm here sitting in the room with the President of the United States and Dr. Joe Biden, and he's delivering a speech. CNN is over here covering it. And I'm in this room with these amazing people, considering that 4 years ago, I was connected to a machine to live. My life was, I had a robust life then, but it was still, reserved. It was still limited to some certain capacity. But all of a sudden, I'm now here, and I'm listening to him deliver this rousing speech. I'm, seeing him interact with Dr. Biden, and they seem so loving, and she's giving him a kiss on the cheek. And he's making jokes like I'm with her. You just kind of, like, say, for me, I still get amazed by things like that. And so I actually posted on my channel that, who would have thought that a Black transplant survivor from a small town in Virginia would be sitting in the room with the President of the United States as he delivers a speech that's being carried live on CNN, because that's just how I still feel when I enter spaces like that. I'm not like saying that I shouldn't be there, but I still get amazed and honored and privileged to be there. And I hope I never, ever lose that feeling.
Terrific.
And I'm going to make another comment too, because this was amazing as well. So I'm not sure if I like the president more or the fact that Shonda Rhimes was there. Shonda Rhimes, the creator of some of the top TV shows from Scandal, Grey's Anatomy, one of my current favorites right now, and that has Queen Charlotte in it, Bridgerton. So it was an amazing night. It was an absolutely amazing night.
Okay, I want to ask you about another amazing night. This past Wednesday, October 18th, you were awarded the AKF's Hero of Hope Award. Previously, you had won the Capital Pride Alliance Award with Bills Mills for outstanding service. Let's talk about the Hero of Hope Award first.
Mm-hmm. So both awards came as a surprise, and the way I was informed was equally surprising. So it was actually in May that I was informed by AKF that I was going to be receiving the award. And I was actually on a Zoom call with two ladies, and we were talking about commissioning an art project for display at a location here in DC. And I get this call, and it's from Ben. And I figure his name comes up on the caller ID, and I said, I better get this, because Ben doesn't call me that, in the middle of the day unless it's important. And so I put them on hold, and Ben proceeds to tell me that he says, I want to be the first to tell you. So they let me tell you, you will be receiving the Hero of Hope Award this year at the Hope Affair. And I stopped for a moment. I got confuddled. I didn't know what to say. And then I proceeded to talk to him for an additional 5 minutes while I still had these two ladies on hold. But, it was a Zoom call. I could see they was talking to each other. But, I did kind of, just forget about them for a while. And I was extremely shocked and surprised that because you do the work and you like doing the work, and you don't really think about awards. You just think about helping people. And to be recognized for that is a very special feeling. And And as for the Bill Miles Award for Outstanding Service, that was another surprise. So I basically had been involved with Capital Pride since 2022, since May of 2022. And again, being service oriented, I was, providing marketing services and PR services. Also, I was developing my photography skills because they would utilize me as one of their photographers quite often. And I was just having a good time and doing what I felt that I wanted to do and that I needed to do because they were giving me all these great opportunities. And then I'm sitting at my desk like in March, and I'm on the call. We're talking about a marketing project and how we were going to launch it and things that they wanted me to do and so forth. And out of the blue, one of the ladies on the call, "Oh, I have something to ask you. We want to give you the Bill Miles Award for Outstanding Service. Say yes." And again, it was a really big surprise and a really big honor. And so, yeah, this year has been an amazing year. And I also want to go back. I just want to go back to the AKF and just say one thing. That night was amazing, but it was made extra special for me because here in DC, I have like an adopted family. Like when I was going through kidney disease, my friend Jeanette, who I had worked with previously as a consultant at another company, she and her family, like, they took me to the emergency room. She sat, and more than one time, by the way, as I was going through my, doing dialysis and having some issues every now and then, making sure that my doctor, the nurses in the ER were doing what they're supposed to be doing, coming with me during my transplant evaluation to be there and make sure that she understood. And not just she, but her entire family, her husband and her son. Was just, and so my adopted family was there. And then my best friend traveled 1,500 miles from the Dominican Republic to be there to support me. And one of my newer friends who came to a brunch I threw 7 years ago and just never left, was there. And just having them in the room to support me that night was awesome. Was just, I will never forget that. It was awesome.
Okay. We were talking before the broadcast, and I was asking you what's new with your kidney and community advocacy work. And you mentioned a couple of things that you can talk about. I know there are some things that you cannot, but the things that you can talk about, what can we expect from John R. in the future?
Well, as I said, I'm going to be at the ASN conference, the American Society of Nephrology conference, Kidney Week in November, which I'm really looking forward to. So there'll be a number of places where I'll be participating there. I have a meeting coming up with NIH next week. And actually, the National Kidney Foundation is actually doing a virtual presentation that's talking about xenotransplantation. So I'll be attending that meeting as well. There are a couple of surprises coming up. Unfortunately, I can't talk about those, but not yet. I will be able to in the future. But the future looks great. People, I'm still able to help people and meet with people. I'm going to be resuming actually within the next couple of weeks the hospital where I did my nocturnal dialysis at. Doesn't mind if I come in and talk to patients, and sit in the waiting room with them to talk to them about home dialysis and transplant options. So, during the pandemic, I wasn't able to do that. But now I've gotten the green light that I actually can do that again. And like I said, one of the things I like really doing is just talking and working with patients, and listening to them, and just telling them about my experience, not telling them what to do, but just sharing my experience with them. So that's what's up within the remainder of this year. And then 2024 will probably go as fast as 2023 has, but there's a lot that's planned for that year too.
Okay. And I want to tell everybody, we'll be keeping an eye on John's Facebook page and his Twitter page to kind of keep up with events. And your Uncle Jim will be sharing that all over Facebook and my 100 groups on there, and to other platforms as well. I wanted to remind everybody that this broadcast is pinned to the top of my personal Facebook page, and in the comments, I put all my research about John R. in the comments. So if you want to catch up with John, or you want to drill down a little bit more on some subject, it's all available to you there. So, okay, we're in the home stretch here, my friend. In closing, is there anything that you would like to say to our audience?
To those who may be thinking about giving up, don't. I encourage you to go out and try and live your life as much as you can. For those of you who are advocates and out there every day, continue doing that. And the only thing I like to say is I like to just reference a post that I did on Instagram earlier this week, that the best aspect about being a kidney health consultant and advocate is that every day I get to work with amazing people whose main goal is to make meaningful and lasting changes that better healthcare for not just kidney patients, but for everybody, when it comes down to it. And that is just an amazing experience for me, is to be able to be, around such amazing people like Uncle Jim.
All right. Well, that concludes our broadcast for the evening. John, what an amazing broadcast this has been. Such great information, and so open about sharing your story. And I can't tell you how much, as a kidney patient, I appreciate this and the opportunity to educate our fellow kidney patients and raise awareness. You're way over the top of the bar, my friend. What a terrific job that you have done tonight. So I appreciate that very much. I've got a couple of things I've got to do to close up with our audience, and you've given us over an hour of your time, almost an hour and a half. So you're free to go, and I'm going to close up the show. And of course, we have a new broadcast next week with another great kidney expert. So we'll be looking forward to getting everybody on and back. And Dawn wants to know where she can go to start to do some of the things that you do, and she's thanking us. So you might want to reach out to Dawn and have a private conversation. So, at any rate, and I want to thank our audience and so many folks that came on tonight and were willing to participate. So, all right, that concludes the broadcast. John, you're the best. Thank you, buddy.
Much. Thank you. All right, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
You too.